Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I don't like being late, and I apologise. We're 3 minutes late in starting. Welcome to this evening's Planning Committee. My name's Councillor White, John White. I am the Chairman, and on my left I have my Vice Chairman, Councillor Heaney. The other councillors who will debate tonight are sitting on the two legs of this table. The committee is the one that will debate and vote on the applications on your agenda. On my left and right are TDC officers, including the Director of Planning and Regeneration and the TDC Senior Solicitor. This is a formal committee meeting, and it's important that the councillors can hear all the presentations and the debate, and therefore I would ask you to please remain quiet while that's going on. The order of business this evening will be the same as usual. For each application, we shall have an officer presentation, then we'll have any public speaking, then any further comments from the officer, and then finally the committee members will ask questions, debate and finally vote on the application. I should add that this meeting is being recorded by the council, so should anybody wish to hear it in the next few days, you will be able to find it on the website. So that will take us nicely on to the agenda for this evening, and ask for any apologies for absence and substitutions.
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies for absence have been received from Councillor Mike Brown, and there is no substitute for him. Thank you. Right.
Thank you very much. And now, councillors, call you to the minutes of the last meeting. That was the 31st of October. Were there any errors, omissions that you wish to draw to my attention? Or can I ask if I can sign them as a true and correct record? I have a proposer and seconder. Right. Thank you very much. That I will do. Item 3, any declarations of interest, that is disclosable pecuniary interest, or in fact any other interests on tonight's agenda item. Councillor Heaney.
I'm Ward Councillor for ELMSTEAD Market, which is the first planning application falls in under that, and I'm going to excuse myself as being predetermined. Thank you. I will be leaving the room.
Right. Thank you very much. Any further? I have some declarations from the floor. Councillor Scott.
Detail land south of St Andrews Close, Holsford, on pages 17 to 26. I shall be speaking tonight.
Thank you very much. And I think I saw Councillor Nichols' hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'm Ward Councillor for ELMSTEAD, amongst others, and I will intend to speak on A1, planning application 17/001917 detail.
Thank you very much. Yes, Councillor.
And obviously, Agenda 7, Councillor Bush, I was speaking in relation to 3 Skighau Stone Green.
Thank you very much. Right, no further declarations. In that case, we move straight on to item 4 on the agenda, which is A1, planning application 17/00927. This is a detailed application, and it's land to the east of Tye Road, ELMSTEAD Market. Turn to the officer.
Right, thank you, Chair. This application is a reserved matters application relating to the construction of a new access to serve 32 dwellings, approved in outline form at appeal in April 2017. Matters of scale, layout, appearance and landscaping are still reserved for a future application, so it's details of access that you're looking at this evening. So the site is located within this area here. It's to the east of Tye Road. You've got Tye Road, which runs along here, and Colchester Road along the bottom of the site here. This area of site has got permission for residential development. So this is the application site. And this is the photograph of Tye Road, which is sort of the main issue for consideration this evening. So in terms of, this is the plan that shows the indicative plan that was granted, well, was submitted at outline stage. And this is just to give you some context of the development. So that is the development of the site. And in terms of the plans under consideration this evening, this is the application site where the proposed houses would go. And as part of this proposal, you're being asked to consider a vehicular access in this location with a footpath, a pedestrian access in this location. There will be plans that show these in more detail further on in the presentation. A footpath along the western side of and a footpath along the western side of Tye Road. There's also work proposed at the junction with Colchester Road. So this shows details of the vehicular access with a footpath either side. You've got a footpath which would link further into the site with an uncontrolled pedestrian crossing at this point. The access is provided with visibility displays of 120 by 2.4 metres in both directions. And this is the pedestrian access, which is proposed towards the southern boundary of the site. So this is actually the boundary of the site. And it links with the proposed footpath on the opposite side of the road. And this shows the proposed footpath on the west side. It was amended from the east side of the road at the time of the appeal. And the inspector considered it was acceptable to consider that amendment because access was a reserved matter, and therefore it was indicative only. So the footpath is 1.5 metres in width. The existing hedge shown in green would be retained, together with a carriageway width of 5.5 metres. Highways advise that ideally a footpath should be 2 metres in width, but this is a guide and final decisions are made on a case-by-case basis. In this case, the 2 metres is not achievable on the land within the applicant's control, and highways consider that 1.5 metre width footpath would cater adequately for the pedestrian activity envisaged to be generated from the development. So the proposed footpath would continue along the western side of Tye Road until the junction with Colchester Road, which runs along here, where there'd be an uncontrolled pedestrian crossing shown here that would link to the existing footpath along here and provide access into the village. The recommendation is for approval this evening, subject to a condition to ensure that highway works are provided at the developer's expense prior to the occupation of the first dwelling proposed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, as far as speakers are concerned, the Parish Council, Councillor Fairweather, if he is with me, if you'd like to come forward, sir, and get established at the table, switch the microphone on, and you have 3 minutes to address us.
Right, thank you, Mr. Chairman, councillors. My name is Ronald Fairweather, councillor with ELMSTEAD Parish Council. Now, I'm sure you've all read the Parish Council concerns with this application over the width of Tye Road and the proposed new 1.5 metre footpath. This is a very busy road with HGVs and farm vehicles using it constantly throughout the day. As this will be the only access for pedestrians from the site to enter the village, we feel it is a very dangerous footpath. The road is busy now and will become even busier when work starts on a new development at Allen's Farm, namely the construction of a new reservoir with 100 additional vehicle journeys per day, and a new biodigester plant with 6 additional vehicle journeys per day. Our other concern is a new garden community, which is right on our border. The latest plans show a very narrow green buffer between our existing boundary and the new garden community. If you approve this development, this green buffer will be eroded even more with little or no break between our boundary and the new built-up areas. People move to Elmstead Market because it is a quiet, friendly village surrounded by acres and acres of open farmland and green belt. This is being eroded piece by piece by the approval, time and time again, of developments on these sacred open spaces. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. And the ward member for Elmstead is Councillor Nichols. And as you're aware, Councillor Nichols, you actually get 5 minutes.
Chairman, members, officers. As I've stated, I am one of the ward members for Elmstead Market, which falls within my ward. This appeal was allowed by one planning inspector, Jason Winfield, which went against the decision of 11 democratically members of this committee and Elmstead Parish Council. The committee and Elmstead Parish Council voted against this application because the applicant could not show suitable access to this field. The inspector, in allowing outline permission, failed to address the matters of access, therefore your original objections still remain. Tye Road is a narrow country road, as I'm sure you saw on your site visit this morning. This road is used as a cut-through by local traffic going to Colchester, thus avoiding Klingo Hill. It is used by HGVs delivering to Allen's Farm, and you've heard the local parish councillor describe the amount of traffic going along that road. ECC Highway's normal footpath requirement is for footpaths pavements to be 2 metres wide. The proposed footpath is considerably less than that requirement. The narrow footpath is unsafe to accommodate pedestrians within the narrow roadway, and Essex County Council Highways are a consultee. They do not make planning decisions. And you may well ask, are Essex County Council Highways fit for purpose when you consider some of their reports? Imagine walking along this footpath during the winter months with rain, frost, perhaps snow, especially at night. There are no street lights, and you'll still get a considerable amount of local traffic using it as a cut-through. School children especially, when returning on the bus from their school, having to walk home if this application is granted. You can refuse this application, and I urge you to do so. Put safety as a priority, not developers' profit. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And now, on behalf of the applicant, Ms. Jessica Pratt, who is a transport consultant. Welcome. If you can switch the mic on when you're ready, and you have 3 minutes, Ms. Pratt.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Jessica Pratt, and I'm representing the applicant. I'm from Cannon Consulting Engineers, the transport consultants for this scheme. This reserve matters application relates only to matters of access and does not cover the principle of development of the site, as this has been established by the Outline Planning Permission. I wish to respond to concerns expressed by Councillor Nichols and the Parish Council with regard to the safety of the proposed footpath along Tye Road. The proposals include a new access to serve a housing development and a new footway along the western side of Tye Road. Various options were explored thoroughly, and the design has been prepared in consultation with Essex County Council as the Highway Authority. It was agreed in support of the outline application, and now more recently in support of this reserved matters application. The proposed footway is 1.5 metres wide to accommodate the existing hedge. This still provides suitable allowance for wheelchair users and parents with children and is suitable to cater for the anticipated pedestrian demand. This is acceptable to Essex County Council, who have confirmed that they have no objection to the proposals. The width is in keeping with the existing footway on Colchester Road, which carries significantly more traffic. The carriageway width of Tye Road adjacent to the footway will be 5.5 metres wide. Tye Road currently varies in width between 5.5 and 5.7 metres, so the overall width will remain consistent, and 5.5 metres is sufficient to allow 2 HGVs to pass within the carriageway. As part of the highway proposals, the existing verge and gullies on the eastern side of the road will be cleared and tidied. The verge is currently encroaching on the carriageway, so this will offer an improvement to the existing situation and in effect widen the carriageway. Essex County Council have assessed the proposals in detail and attended a meeting on site to confirm their view. These matters have been considered fully by them and they have no objection to the scheme. The Highways Officer has also been consulted on the anaerobic digester at Allen's Farm and Elmstead Hall Reservoir, both of which will also be accessed from Tye Road. Essex County Council have considered the HGV movements associated with these and are content with all three schemes and do not consider there to be a conflict. As identified in the officer's report, the detailed design of the access and the proposed footpath results in no material harm to highway safety, provides adequate links to the existing village, and would not materially harm the character of the area. As such, I hope that the committee will endorse the officer's report and recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, councillors, now is your chance for your say. I think most of you were on the original application, and perhaps one or two weren't, when it was refused, and principally, as one of the respondents has just told us, it was on this question of the footpath. So I think we've got to think about that. The inspector has granted the development, but really it is this question of the footpath. Councillors, over to you. Yes, councillor.
Thank you, Chairman. I was interested to hear from the agent that the road is 5.5 metres, which will adequately allow 2 HGVs to pass. We've been told that the footpath will be 1.5 metres. I'm just wondering where that was measured. We were shown the grass verge opposite that would accommodate a 1.5 metre footpath, but you only had to walk 5 yards further down the road towards Colchester Road, and it reduced in size to about half a metre and less. The only way to accommodate a footpath there would be to take out the hedge and fill in the ditch. So I'd be interested to hear where it was actually measured.
Right. Would you like to ask the officer if she's got that, whether it is 5.5 metres all the way down? I have to say that I rather agree with the last speaker. It did look exceedingly narrow, but when we were there this morning.
Right, okay. In terms of the plan that's been submitted, which has been confirmed to be acceptable by the Highway Authority, excuse me. It shows that the carriageway width is 5.5 metres at that point where that line is, and also further down to that location here. It also shows that the 1.5 metre footpath can be achieved with the hedge being retained. Well, that's what the plans say, and that's what Highways have endorsed, and that's all that I can say on that.
Can I come back on that?
Yes.
Several of us walked along that road, not very far from the proposed pedestrian access, and it could well be 1.5. We didn't have a tape measure with us by that pedestrian outlet from the site, but you only had to walk a couple of yards further down the road, and it narrowed considerably to about half a metre at the most. Then there was the roots of the hedge, and immediately behind that the ditch. So you couldn't possibly accommodate a 1.5 footpath there. So I'd like that to be measured properly.
Right. Yes, councillor.
Yes, I'm going to agree with you, Councillor Benson, entirely. I walked down there, I looked at it, and I realised that they were white thorn, and the bushes there have huge root cluster. And I believe from the agent himself, he informed us that sadly he's not getting a lot of cooperation from the farming community around him on this development. And therefore we are in the laps of the gods as to whether or not he will cooperate. One, they were very overgrown. I presume we all saw that on the site visit. And it just sort of comes to my mind, who is going to maintain these bushes if they don't belong but only to that farmer who has sort of in parts cut them back? Who is actually going to maintain those? Because they're jagged with thorns, because that's the nature of the beast. And of course the other thing is I walked further down as I had need to go back there tonight. And I stopped and looked. As you got to the very bottom where it says R12.0, a little bit further back, that's a culvert, solid concrete, heavily guarded by railings. And there I measured across and I got 3 foot steps out and roughly about less than a metre across there. And I'm just wondering, I don't see anything wrong with the actual application, but I'm just concerned that this footpath is worrying me immensely, especially those bushes, and who's going to maintain them.
Good. Councillor Everett?
I have a few questions about Essex County Council and their policies. In this particular application, we're being asked to accept a proposed footway of 1.5 metres wide. My understanding is that normally policy for Essex County Council is that footways should be 2 metres wide. That being the case, what have we had from Essex County Council that establishes that 1.5 metres wide would be sufficient in this particular case?
Right. That's your first one. You didn't register. You might have other questions, but shall I take that one first? Right, and Councillor McWilliams?
I'm on a similar point as well as Councillor Everett. I am concerned. I know that as a statutory authority that we have to bow down gracefully to highways, but I do believe that if there is in policy 2 metres is the width of a recognised footpath, how can they change their policy to suit whatever the situation is? I can't make sense out of that. We've had this come up before with other applications. Can we just find some way of an explanation that highways puts it in policy 2 metres, but when it comes to it, they can change the width?
I think if I'm right, I will come to you in a moment, sir. I think if I'm right, at Great Bentley in your own parish we had this problem once before, but then it was a 2 metre wide footway for most of it, and it was just round the corner of a property that was reduced for a matter of yards, rather than 100 yards, whatever this one is. Yes, Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Chairman. If the officer could go back, I think it's the slide before this one. No, it's the one that shows that one. Thank you. We're here to establish the access and the footpath. I don't have any problem with the access, either the pedestrian one or the vehicle one, but I do have a problem with this pedestrian and then the footpath. So you come out of the pedestrian access, if we grant it, you cross the road, you walk down the road, a 60-mile-an-hour speed limit, you get to the bottom, and then you cross the road again. Doesn't make sense, really. But my problem is that the footpath is 1.5 metres wide, acceptable to Essex highways. Why, we don't know. Yet this is a national speed limit. And we were there were 3 vehicles that came round that bend and only slowed down because our bus was in the way. I can't accept the footpath being that wide. It'd have to be wider for me, I'm afraid. The access to the site, not a problem, but the footpath definitely. Thank you, Chairman.
Right, nobody's indicating. Could you sum up those so far? Suzanne, please.
So in terms of the issue of who will maintain the hedgerows, currently, highways have confirmed that the footpath can take place on their highway land. So anything that overhangs or is on their land, they are the authority that's responsible for the maintenance of that. In terms of what we've had from highways, which tells us that a 1.5 metre width footpath is acceptable, is the consultation response on their amended comments. So on page 12 of the agenda, it refers to a specific drawing number, which is the drawing that you've been shown this evening, which clearly states that they are happy with that drawing number, which clearly shows a footpath of 1.5 metres. In terms of further information on why they feel that that's acceptable, obviously all I can do is go on the information that they've provided me, and they have confirmed that it's they've confirmed that ideally they like footways to be 2 metres in width, and that it's a guide and final decisions are made on a case-by-case basis. So they've taken a view with this that given the pedestrian activity, and they feel that development would not generate a huge number of pedestrians using it, it's felt that the construction of the 1.5 footway would cater adequately for the development, and the pedestrians would have some form of infrastructure to get them off the carriageway.
Right, thank you for those. Yes, Councillor Everett. Oh, I'll take.
Thanks for that full list of justifications from Essex County Council. I don't feel that we have enough information in front of us to actually be happy as a planning authority in taking this decision. It is all very well for Essex County Council to say that they're happy with it. They're not the ones taking the decision. We are. We are the ones that have the legal responsibility to take this decision. And getting a feeling from the rest of the people that have so far spoken in this committee, I think there are other councillors that are concerned that perhaps there might be an issue here that perhaps needs to be unpacked further. I'd like to tentatively suggest that it might be an idea for Essex County Council to meet with the committee on site to discuss those very concerns, similarly as we did in Great Bentley some time ago. But I say that tentatively because that wasn't exactly a helpful situation either, so any suggestions might well be useful from other people around this committee, I suspect.
Thank you. Councillor Alexander.
I'm sorry to keep harping on about these bushes and this, but of course it's very important to this application. For a start, again, I cannot only but reiterate what we were told this morning by the agent themselves or by the developer, that the farmer was not prepared to give up those bushes, and they are in effect private property, and agricultural land lie along those hedges and those ditches. If they are adjacent to his land, he's not prepared to deal with them. If they get into an overgrown state, and if we, by highways, allowing this to go ahead and to build, who would be responsible for cutting them? Would TDC go down there and cut those, or would it be charged against the farmer himself to go out and cut those hedges, which he might do once a year maybe, just to keep them in a neat and tidily fashion? And the other thing is, I don't understand, we have policies of 2 metres. If we keep chopping and changing and saying, well, this is acceptable and that's not acceptable, why is the point of having the policy in the first place? We might as well not have these policies. And I think it's really important that the direction given to us here is clear and coherent, so we know exactly when we come back to you, and I mean, you answer the questions most admirably, that we have some idea of what we're working with. Other applicants have lost planning permission because of insufficient space, and now we're saying it's okay for this one, and I'm worried that it's being unfair to those we have dealt with in the past.
Thank you. Further thoughts? Yes, Councillor.
It's just another observation on the hedges and the width of the footpath. Where the pedestrian access is from the site onto the road, where the footpath is wider and possibly 1.5 metres, it's quite high up. And to construct a footpath there, they would have to lower it to make it in line with the road. So it's not so high. It's very, very deep vegetation, and most of that vegetation is roots from the hedges that come across that path. So any digging there to provide that footpath would damage the roots of the hedges and kill them. So I don't see how you can actually construct a footpath on top of existing hedges roots.
Any further comments? Yes, Councillor Baker.
I'm in agreement with Councillor Everett on this. I don't think I have in front of me enough information to make an informed decision. Like I've said, I'm quite happy with the access, as is Essex County Council Highways, but a paragraph saying that they're quite happy and this drawing is fine and everything else doesn't give me enough information. So I would propose that we defer and have a meaningful discussion with the highways officer as to exactly their policy. Is it 2 metres? Is it a guideline? So that we can come to an informed decision. And that's my proposal, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Everett.
And I'd like to second that, please.
Right. Yes, Councillor Benison.
And could we add into that that the whole path needs to be measured from the access right the way down to Colchester Road, the width of it? Thank you.
Yeah. Before I put that decision to defer to you, to the vote, and just ask Suzanne if she has any comments to make on that.
I think if you're looking to defer the application, I think you need to be clear on what information that you're looking to achieve and what the outcomes would be from that meeting, because on the face of it, we have got highways comments. They have been out, they have measured it, they have agreed that they're happy with the proposal. So I think if you're looking to defer it, we need to be a bit clearer on what you're actually looking to achieve and what additional information that would be required.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Solicitor on this one.
Members, this might assist you. I've scribbled down as you've been speaking that you feel that you have not got sufficient information to understand how the Highways Authority can justify departing from their policy of 2 metres to reduction of 1.5 metres. I think that's really the point I've picked up, is that they have a policy of 2 metres. They're looking at 1.5 as being sufficient, but you don't understand how they've departed from that policy. For this application, you obviously can only compare. There has been reference to other applications and other footpaths, but you can't take those into account. It has to be on this one. But I think the main thing I've got from this, from members' debate, is there's not enough information to understand how the Highways Authority can justify departing from their policy of 2 metres, which you understand is a guide, but you would like to have more information for this case.
I would ask the proposer if you're accepting for a reason for deferment.
I think that's what I tried to say. So, if it's a departure from policy, yes, then why? In this particular instance, thank you.
On the grounds of safety as well. Yeah. Right now.
Sorry, and the.
Oh, did you? Somebody else wish to speak?
I'm just thinking then remeasurement of the.
The remeasurement for the total length. Yes, good point. Good point. Councillor Alexander, before I take the vote, do you wish?
Yes, I'm going to come back on this because I think I need to. Yes, I agree with you entirely of what you have just said on the first part of this. I endorse that. But what I was trying to get across is that the only way to achieve anywhere near 1.5 metres is to cut in to the hedging that does not belong to any to the highways. And this is what I'm trying to get a point. We would be actually giving, are we giving permission tonight? If we gave such permission, look, go ahead and do this, and you can chop those bushes down, although we know damn well that they're private and they belong to somebody else. Are we in a position to give such permission?
Right, I think the point's taken. Councillor Holmes.
Yeah, we had made this decision way back last year, originally, about refusing it. The, what's he called? And the inspector obviously decided that it was in the interest of whatever and appealed, you know, let them have the appeal. The highways have been out, as you said, they've measured, they've done everything that they possibly can. As much as I hate to say this, I propose that we allow it, because it's just going to go on and on and on, and this is never going to get sorted out. And I honestly don't believe that the highways are going to budge. I think they're going to put their heels in, and they've already said exactly what they've got to say. So I propose we approve this.
Well, I shall take the original proposal in front of me. I have to do that in order, and if and when that were to get overturned, then I would want a seconder for John's. Yeah, that's correct. Yes, we have a seconder. Councillor Baker proposed, Councillor Everett seconded, and they are both happy with those words. So I'm going to put it to the vote now then. Those in favour of deferment to have a meeting with County Highways on site on those lands, principally on safety and width. Right, those in favour... Oh, I'm going to give the officer one final say.
Just really like to question whether a site meeting is actually necessary and whether it's something that could be dealt with without a site meeting in terms of getting further justification, or whether you're happy to leave that up to officers.
We have had two reasons recently where the site officer was, where the Essex County Highways have been quite prepared to come out and meet us. Ardley was the most recent one where they actually overturned their decision. So I'm getting nods. Question before we actually take the vote is whether you feel it's necessary to have County Highways on scene.
Okay, and so in that case, can we clarify on who would attend the meeting? Because I don't think it would be beneficial for everyone to be there, whether a representative...
Good point. Good point. Well, committee...
I will not be going.
Right, okay, John. Councillor Baker?
Chairman, could I suggest that it obviously be yourself, and as I've proposed it, I would prefer there to be at any meeting, and obviously my seconder as well, if appropriate, on behalf of the committee.
If those are... Yes, does that get general nods? Right.
Comes the whole meeting.
You could say any of the committee that want to come along.
Mob-handed. Right. So you know what the vote is about now. Those in favour of the deferment, please show. And those against, please show. This application is deferred for the meeting with County Highways.
Chairman, could you inform the parish council when this meeting takes place?
That would be the normal procedure, sir. Yeah. Right. We move now then.
Can we get Councillor Heaney back in?
Oh, we better. Yes. We'll move on to item 2, which is the planning application number 1700658. This is another detailed application for St Andrew's Close in ALRESFORD. The original permission was granted. Well, I'm sure the officer will tell us.
Okay, thank you. This is a reserved matters application for the erection of up to 45 dwellings, including new public green and village square, an ecological buffer and associated infrastructure. The application includes details of all matters, so access, appearance, landscaping, layout and scale. And the outline permission was granted at Planning Committee on the 19th of November 2015. So the site is outlined in red on the attached plan and is situated on the southern edge of ALRESFORD. As you can see by the plan, this is the site and it's enclosed on two sides by woodland, which is protected ancient woodland. You've got the primary school in this location and the residential properties of Ford Lane, which are nearest to the application site, and those within St Andrew's Close. It shows some photographs of what you've seen today. So they're the properties on the west side of St Andrew's Close to give you an idea of the character of the surrounding area. That is the nearest property in St Andrew's Close, looking towards the western boundary of the site, which is the boundary with the primary school. And that's looking to the south-west corner of the site. As you can see, there's vegetation along the boundaries. And that's looking towards the opposite corner, the southeast corner of the site. And again, the eastern boundary with the woodland. And that shows the northern side boundary, which is the boundary with Brindle House in St Andrew's Close. And again, that is the boundary showing the relationship with the other property on the other side of St Andrew's Close. And that is a fairly dated photo now, but that shows the access onto St Andrew's Close. So in terms of the proposed layout, the site would be served by a single access point from St Andrew's Close in this location, and it will provide access to all the dwellings by a circular link road. The planning permission, as mentioned, is for 45 dwellings. They're predominantly detached with some semi-detached, and the proposed development comprises of 17 4-bed houses, 23 3-bed houses, 3 2-bed houses and 2 1-bedroom flats. So given the nature, the fairly enclosed nature of the site, the circular layout is considered acceptable. The plot sizes are similar to what is existing in St Andrew's Close and therefore considered to be compatible with the surrounding area. In terms of impact on neighbours, given the distance from Brindle House, which is just about there, to any proposed development, it's considered that there'd be no adverse impact. And with regards to the property on the opposite side of the road, the properties are in line with that and follow the building lines, so it's not considered that there would be any detrimental impact. Letters of objection have been received from those properties in Ford Lane, so the Spinney and Old Rectory. These are located off the plan in this location, but you can see them on the plan in your agenda. And it's considered that whilst there may be some increase in overlooking, because these properties are 2-storey, that the distance is well in excess of the 25 metres back-to-back distance recommended by Essex County Council Highways. So it's therefore considered that any impact would not be sufficient to warrant reason for refusal. And in terms of parking, all properties are provided with adequate parking in accordance with the council's adopted standards, and many have long driveways which would enable parking in excess of the standards. In terms of the private amenity space, out of the 45 dwellings, 8 do not meet the minimum private amenity space provision, and they're shown on the attached plan by the yellow triangle. The deficit is between 2 square metres and 15 square metres. However, they're all provided, all the space provided is usable in terms of the shape of the garden, and given the access to open space within the site, it's considered that there is sufficient amenity space and that this deficit is considered acceptable. In terms of the potential affordable housing units, this has not been agreed yet, specifically which ones will be gifted. There is a requirement on the outline stage for 3 units to be gifted, and the requirement is for the smaller units. So it will be one of this cluster, it'll be 3 of that cluster of 4 units which will be provided. But as I say, it's the exact ones to be gifted have not been agreed. So in terms of the design, I'll go through the different house types that are proposed. There is a mixture of house types, and all dwellings are 2-storey in height, and they're proposed to be a mixture of brick and render with slate and tile roof. So as you'll see, the detail of the dwellings are varied with different roof forms and the use of chimneys and porches, brick plinths and traditional detailing to provide variation and visual interest throughout the development. All the proposed dwellings address the street to create an active street frontage. And in terms of the materials, the specific materials have not been provided, but this can be dealt with by condition. But it shows that there is enough of a mix throughout the site to provide variety and visual interest across the development. And this shows the selection of street scenes, so you can see how the development would look all together. And it's officer's view that the development is acceptable, and it's recommended for approval subject to the conditions set out in the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. One of the questions, I'm going to take a speaker, but one of the questions that cropped up this morning, which I don't believe you mentioned, there was some speed limitations shown on the original map. I think they're the 2 dotted ones either side, speed bumps going through, and that is still the proposal as far as we know. Right, okay, thank you. In that case, we go to the speakers, and I don't have anybody in favour or against. The town and parish indicated this morning they wouldn't be sending anybody this evening, so we go straight to the ward member, Councillor Scott.
Evening, Chairman, councillors, thanks for coming today. A cold morning. I'm speaking against the application because this development, in my view, should not be houses, it should be bungalows. These houses are too close to the school, and there will be an increase of traffic movements going up and down St Andrews Close. As you see on the diagram there, the school does have a swimming pool there, which is right up close to the boundary fence, and I feel that would be too much for developments to be too close to the swimming pool in the summer months when the children and local people surrounding areas do use the swimming pool there. The maintenance of the site in terms of cutting the open space, grass, trees and bushes and so on, it says there could be a maintenance company that's going to maintain this. My parish council have asked respectively if they can take this on board rather than a maintenance company. The ring road layout, as seen in the diagram, it should not be a through road. The parish council and I have the opinion that the bottom end of the map you see there should be blocked off, so people come down and they have to go back the same way, not as a circuit. The parish council also don't agree with the speed bumps there, only if it's blocked off the other end. The proposed dwellings are too large for this area, and it should be bungalows, as I've mentioned earlier. The bungalows were, if councillors are minded to approve, if they could perhaps ask the developer or defer it, so bungalows are to the boundary side, not housing across the site. The bungalows should be 1 to 2 bedroom dwellings In my view, if there were bungalows on this site with small manageable gardens and electric charging points, the site should be a retirement village similar to Meadows Close in Elmsted Market. Elderly residents in Alresford are part of our local community, and they are part of local groups. Their family and friends are here in Alresford, and they would be close to the church, the village hall, and the bus routes and the doctor's surgery. This site, in my view, should not be housing but bungalows for the purpose of elderly residents in Alresford. There are other communities in our district where we have retirement areas for that purpose. There are residents in Alresford who want to downsize to 1-bedroom to 2-bedroom bungalows, and I am quite disappointed that this hasn't been put forward by the applicant. This location would be quiet for elderly residents, and this kind of scheme would be better than the current application being proposed. This site would be respectful due to the location of near to Alresford Church and the services provided. I have to point out that on Sundays, weekend Sundays, this area of St Andrew's Close and Ford Lane, the church car park and the village hall car park is filled with parking is filled up with people visiting Alresford for the games that take place. So there will be more traffic movements on St Andrew's Close. The elderly, if this was a proposed site for elderly pensioner area, the elderly are more unlikely to drive, so there'd be traffic movements will be down to minimum. Many residents in Alresford are concerned with the mass proposed developments that are taking place in Alresford, and there was no consideration on all the other applications for residential areas for the elderly. So I'm asking councillors if they possibly ask the applicant or defer this for the purpose of the applicant to come back or to add another application to have bungalows. I also want to confirm on the Section 106 monies, please confirm how much this will be. I've seen it in the document paper. It seems to. I was led to believe it was a different figure. Now it's this figure. So I'd like an officer to confirm on that. Please consider either refusing the application, as I strongly believe this would be too much for a small site, and that a site for a pensioner community would be more appropriate for St Andrew's Close rather than this proposed development. Affordable housing should be on here. 45 houses, 25% of 45. Some of that should be affordable housing, and I'm disappointed that there isn't any affordable housing. I know the officer said there was 3. I don't think that's adequate enough on site. But overall, Chairman, councillors, please refuse this application because I feel it's the wrong type of housing for a small close like St Andrew's Close, and it should be emphasised a pensioner community area where my residents will be able to downsize their large houses and retire and live in small properties where they've got access to the church, the village hall, the bus services and the doctors and the shops are all in the southern half of Alresford, and this would be ideal. So I respectfully ask councillors if they can refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Whether the officer wants to pick up anything, the question was really on the Section 106, which I understand was agreed in the outline conditions, so perhaps you could help the council on that.
Yeah, so just to come back on a few points that were raised by Councillor Scott. In terms of the increase in vehicular movement, members should be aware that this is a reserved matters application, so the outline consent, so the principle of 45 dwellings on that site has been agreed, albeit it didn't give the number of bedrooms and the type of mix, so that is for consideration this evening. In terms of the maintenance of open space, the Parish Council have expressed a desire to maintain it. In terms of the legal agreement, which was dealt with at outline stage, it's possible for either it to be maintained by management companies set up by the developer or to be transferred to the council. For that, the developer has indicated that it would be transferred to the council, and I believe discussions are ongoing with our open space department for it then to be future transferred to the parish council, but that is the matter that will be dealt with as part of the Section 106 that was granted at outline stage. In terms of the actual monies involved in the section 106. I can't give you an exact figure, but it is outlined in section or paragraph 6.18 of the report, which is for 3 dwellings to be gifted to the council. There was reference that this wasn't sufficient, but because the properties are actually being gifted, that's why a smaller number than other sites has been agreed, and that was dealt with at the outline stage. If the open space was to be transferred to the council or the parish council, there'd be a maintenance contribution of £86,400. There would also be a financial contribution towards play space, which would be based on the number of bedrooms proposed, and a financial contribution towards education. So this is the early years and childcare and secondary school transport costs. But again, that would depend on the exact number of bedrooms and the need at the timing the development goes ahead. So I'm afraid I'm not possible to confirm that actual amount for those. And there has been mention that about a retirement village would be better than the current application. At outline, consent was granted for residential development with no restrictions. And as members be aware, you need to consider the proposal that is in front of you this evening, which is not for a retirement village.
Thank you. Well, in a moment, councillors, it'll be your question time. I'm going to get one in early. There is mention, and I think I know the answer, from Essex County Council talking about the need for an archaeological survey to be done. Now, my understanding... no, I won't even go on my understanding. I'll get you to explain, was it?
Okay, in terms of the archaeological comments, they are covered to a certain extent within paragraph 6.35 of the report, but just to try and explain it succinctly. At the time of the outline consent, Essex County Council Archaeology advised that the site may be of some archaeological interest, and they requested a condition that required their standard conditions require fieldwork and things to be done to establish whether there is actually anything of interest on the site. That condition was worded in the sense that prior to commencement of development that this work should be done and carried out. Essex County Council archaeological view is that this should have been done to inform the reserve matters consent, because they feel that if anything was found that couldn't be worked around, then in an ideal world the archaeological work should have been done. In terms of planning's requirement, because the condition is prior to occupation or prior to commencement, we cannot insist that that work is done. And if it were the case to be found that once the work is done, if there's something that is found that means that they can't carry out the development as shown, then they would need to come back with an amended scheme. So hopefully that explains it.
Thank you very much. Right, councillors, question time.
Councillor Baker.
Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Chairman. A number of questions for the officer, actually. One of the conditions in the recommendation, number 7, is hours of construction. Can we just clarify what they would normally be? Because normally we see timings. Secondly, can you go back to the slide that shows the properties that don't meet the amenities size, that one's? And you indicated those in red are a block of 4 or 5. And they were going to be the ones potentially gifted to the council. I'd like to know what, although it's not yet agreed, what is their deficit in amenities? Because what I don't want to see is us agreeing to the application, potentially, and then us getting properties that have the smallest gardens, if that makes sense. So if you can just clarify that for me, thank you.
Right, whilst the officer's searching for that one, Councillor Bennison.
Thank you, Chairman. I seem to recall that when we first gave permission for this on 16th of May last year. We talked at great length about the school and the swimming pool, and we did ask for conditions to be put in that there were single-storey buildings backing onto the school and sufficient screening. And then I now understand that all dwellings are going to be two-storey. So that's flying against what we put in our conditions last year. And also, where the swimming pool is, the back gardens there's spasmodic planting, but several of the houses would have full view of the swimming pool from their upstairs windows. So I'd like that to be clarified, please.
Right. Whilst we're still searching for the answer, Councillor Heaney.
Have you found the answer? Yeah, she's found the answer, so she's
Right, well, we've got the answer for the first question.
Yeah. So in terms of the construction hours, it would be the standard, which is 7 till 7, Monday to Friday, and then 8 till 1 on 8 to 1 on Saturday with no work Sunday and bank holidays. Other question was regards to the amenity space. So in this location, you've got 2 one-bedroom or the flats which meet the requirement. Then you've got this plot which has 70 with a standard. This plot which is 65 with a requirement of 75. The middle one which is 70, again with the same requirement of 75. And the final one is 60 with a requirement of 75. Sorry? They are 2-bed. Yes. The ones that are deficit of 2-bed, yeah. And the other question was regards to the overlooking of the swimming pool. On the outline consent, it was actually put as an informative that the property should be single-storey in that location, but as we've said, they are 2-storey properties, but it is felt that there is adequate space from there, and whilst there be some sort of overlooking, there's nothing in planning terms which seeks. It's not like you've got overlooking into private garden areas. There's nothing that sets out a requirement for there to be no overlooking of a primary school.
Right. That's answered. Councillor Everett.
Thank you, Chair. I have a few questions relating to ecology. At the outline permission, would the officer remind us of the conditions that were made at outline relating to ecology? And the reason why I ask that question is because I think that there is a possibility that we might need to add conditions to this if we were minded to approve, with relation to lighting, particularly on the eastern side of that, but actually I think probably across the whole site. If you could answer that, it would be helpful.
Right. Yes, if you would.
So in terms of the conditions on the outline consent, there was a condition that required the development to be carried out and maintained in accordance with the ecological management plan. And in terms of that, that talked about various things, but from memory I don't think it covered lighting, so we can add a condition on for that to be covered.
Good. Now, Councillor Heaney.
I've got a question and I'm going to say something. I'd like to know what the houses that are going to be gifted to the council look like, because they shouldn't look any different from the other houses and stand out as council-type houses. And while you're looking at that, I'm going to say, you know, you can always tell when a development's overdeveloped and cramped, because you get parking courts and the gardens aren't the right size. So 8 out of these gardens out of 45 are not the right size. And it annoys me that we put in an informative, which is which most developers take notice of if they want to get their planning passed at the committee, which says that there should be bungalows backing onto the school and also in the bottom left-hand corner, I understand. And it's, and can't understand why anybody should call that a village green, which is about the size of a small garden in the bottom left-hand corner. And I also do make the point that it would be more sensible for them to have done the archaeological survey before they put the plans in, because they might find a Roman villa in this area, and that would scupper their design.
Right, Councillor McWilliams, have you got a point? No, right. Councillor Baker? Huh?
Was you, Linda? It was me, sorry. Was it Linda?
Yep.
Thank you. I'm going to go on about the size of the gardens, I'm afraid. The properties, the three together, the potentially gifted ones, the size of the gardens to their rear, so on that plan, to the right, are they in excess of what is required for those three properties? So I can't actually see what the plot number. Oh yes, 29, 30 and 31. Please, thank you.
Right, if I just come back on what the plots will look like of the affordable housing. I just need to find them. So there will be potentially the affordable housing, so plots 41 and 42. And then that would be the plots. So you can see they don't look any different to any other development, any other of the other proposed developed buildings. And in terms of the question I think Councillor Baker was raising, in terms of the amenity sizes of these properties, was that, so you've got some of these are in excess, so that one is, and yeah, so that one is 122. These are rough calculations, bear in mind. 122 square metres, where there'll be a requirement of 100. This one here has 135 with a requirement of 100. And then this one here is literally 101 and it has a requirement of 100, so.
Linda.
Councillor McWilliams.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just want to just go over, I agree with the fact that we did actually say originally that we wanted to see bungalows on that boundary, especially as it was overlooking the school and the swimming pool. I would have liked to have seen that and still like to see that made possible. Also, the other comment regarding the affordable housing, obviously the land to that right of the red line, there is an opportunity there surely to increase that area. I don't see that just because they're being gifted that they shouldn't actually look similar and have the similar sizes. That's my opinion and that's how I feel about it. And there was something else, but I'll probably come back to it. I can't understand my notes, but I just wanted to make those comments. Thank you.
Councillor Everett.
In light of those comments and the clear concern of the committee relating to those garden sizes, I'd like to propose that we defer this application with two things in mind. Firstly, to rectify the issue over the gifted houses being similar in appearance and garden size, and the second one in relation to the properties fronting the school and particularly where the the swimming pool is be 1 storey or 1.5 stories, question mark.
Right, yes, Councillor? Right, I'm going to take a bit more debate on it first. Yes, Councillor McWilliams?
I've just remembered. I just wonder if officers could point out, somebody spoke about the green space, but isn't that a green space at the top of the plan up there? Is that part of it, or just at the top?
So there's 2 areas of green space. So there's this area here, and then there's a smaller area here. And also referred to within the green space is the ecological buffer that goes entirely around the site.
Right, Councillor Baker.
Chairman, I appreciate that Councillor Everett's made a proposal about deferring. I have a concern about the gifted housing not having policy compliant gardens, and I appreciate that we can't steal more than 1 metre from one of the properties at the back, but they seem to be oddly shaped, so I don't see why at least 2 of them can't have a bit extra garden. I appreciate there's a huge amount of open space in there, and it's obviously over the 10% of the potential policy that we have, and I concur with my colleagues about the overlooking of the swimming pool and the school. However, it looks as though there's going to be some substantial landscaping eventually, but it will depend on how long that takes to grow, unless it's going to be put in already mature. I'm not sure about the bungalows, but I will agree with my colleagues to defer to get the other matters considered. Thank you, Chairman.
Right. No, yes. Yes, Councillor.
Thank you, Chairman. May I ask the officer what the distance is on the buffer where the boundary is for the school and the boundary of the gardens of those houses nearest? What the measurement is, the distance? Thank you, Chairman.
So in terms of the measurements taken from directly adjacent to the swimming pool, you've got the buffer is 6 metres in width, and then you've got proposed planting, which they're proposing to add some more planting there. But you've actually got a distance from the boundary to the rear property, the rear wall of that property of 19.8 metres.
60 foot. Yes, Councillor Alexander.
Thank you, Chair. Just a matter of interest. I didn't look at the original application. Of course, I wasn't sitting at that time. The swimming pool, is that open air or is that enclosed? Sorry?
I have to turn to the local councillor, which I shouldn't, but he knows the...
The swimming pool, Chairman, is covered. It does have a roof on it, but during the summer months it's lowered, so it's open to the elements. So it's both.
Yes.
And Chairman, I'd like to mention also about the loop road. No one mentioned officer.
Yeah. I think your experience, councillor, knows that we can't open a debate at that stage. But yes, in answer to the question, it would appear it is principally covered, but in the summer months they open the cover. So,
can I also ask then, the houses that are adjacent to that, the 2-storey, if I was up in the top of those 2 stories, would I be able to look over into the swimming pool while those children were swimming? Is that, yes? Is that not child protection issue?
Yes, please.
I think in answer to that, I suppose it depends on how high the vegetation is, but I would assume that there would be some views from a first floor window, given the height of it, into the swimming pool, because the sites are relatively flat, so there's no change in levels.
Right. Any further questions before I put the proposal to you? Now I will have to...
just clarify something.
Yes, all right, yes.
Sorry, members, before you go to the vote, I just wanted to double check that one of the reasons for deferral, as proposed by Councillor Everett and seconded by Councillor Benison, included that the gifted houses were similar in appearance. To clarify whether the gifted houses were similar in appearance, I thought that the officer said that they were the same. The gardens were different. Yeah. I just wanted to double check.
And the bungalows, that was the other one, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was just the point I wanted to clarify.
Yeah.
Yes, we were on those properties. We're going to make sure that we get 100 square metres in them. That was the point, rather than the design. Is my understanding. Right, you now know. Yes, I'll give the officer a chance before we take the vote.
So, in terms of the issue with the properties adjacent to or near the school, if the vote is successful, we need clarification of which properties along that boundary that you're referring to. Are you talking this one,
yes,
that one, and that one?
And the one next to it. And the one next to it. And what about the one at the top? Because that looks into the school, that top one, doesn't it? Going to the first one on the left. Going up a bit. Yeah, there.
That one.
You've got quite a bit of well-established vegetation.
Yeah, and the other one.
I would like your views, but it would seem to me, obviously, the three that have just been outlined.
Yeah, I mean, I think...
And the third.
In terms of our view is that this one here is only going to get obscure views, and given the planting, it's probably no views. These two, perhaps, and that one. But again, this one from the boundary has a distance of sort of 26 metres. And given the way it's orientated, I think any views would be minimal.
Yeah. So three, we're talking about three, which we would like to see as bungalows, or 1.5 storey. Yeah.
Can I just check something with Suzanne, please? Sorry, Chairman, I just wanted to make sure that members are aware of something that Planning Officer said at the outset, was that it was, with regards to the bungalows, it was an informative that was put on at outline stage, as it is not something in planning terms that would stand up as any ground for refusal. So the reason for highlighting it at this stage is that obviously that is something that you would like to have further discussion with the developers on. I don't think it's something you can enforce in planning terms. I just want to make that point clear.
Councillor Everett?
Surely we here are looking at a detailed application which looks at the specific form of the housing right across the whole thing. So therefore, surely, either it is acceptable to us or it is not, or in parts, and so therefore it would be something that we would have legitimate concern to be able to change, whether it were because I think my understanding is that the outline position was dwellings. It did not define what those dwellings should be.
I think the point is the discussions can take place on your legitimate concerns, but we would, as I say, those discussions can take place with the developers on your concerns.
Councillor Baker. And then
Obviously, we're going to potentially ask the developers to have in-depth discussions with the officers, but we've only mentioned 3 properties. Now, one of those appears to be potentially it's going to throw out the design, if you see what I'm saying, because the street scene will be 2-storey, 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 bungalow, 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 2-storey. So the discussion, I think, has to also be to make sure that it's not out of character with the rest of it.
And Councillor Benison, who was one of the movers, wanted to say something.
Go on. Apparently Councillor Benison's indicated first. Go on.
Yes. I understand that you say that what we thought we were putting down as a condition in the when we gave approval last year was actually only an informative. I thought it was a condition. And the reason was on health and safety. The safety of children should be paramount. When you're building houses with back rooms that can look directly into either covered or uncovered swimming pool with children there in swimming costumes, we were concerned that there was a health and safety issue, and I think that should take priority over anything else. The other thing is, with the 3 properties that we've talked about, asking for them to be reduced in storey height bungalows, it looks to me as though they're both semi-detached. So presumably they would have to be 2 pairs of semi-detached bungalows. If they're semi-detached at the moment, which it looks from here that they are.
No, they're detached.
Are they?
Yeah.
Right. Now's the time. I don't think we can go over the previous planning permission, whether it should be an informative or a condition. What's done is done, and therefore we can still, that would be our aim if it came up again. So those, I think we've got a proposer and a seconder. Councillor Everett and then Councillor Benison the second. Yeah, and you're happy with these trimmings. Those in favour of deferring this one, please show. And those against? 1 against. That item will be deferred for further discussions with the developer.
I think it's blooming arrogant to say they're going to have a village green, and then they put in that, call that tiny thing in the bottom.
Yeah, but the top bit as well.
Quite proactive by taking it all over.
We move on to 17-01477. This is another detailed application, and it's on the site of the former Betts factory in Ipswich Road, Colchester, which, for those people who don't appreciate, happens to be in the district council boundary. So, straight to Suzanne again.
Okay, thank you, Chair. With regards to this application, I'd just like to refer you to the update sheet, which has updates in regards to clarification of one of the conditions and comments that have been received from Natural England confirming they no longer have an objection to the proposal. So this is a reserved matters application for the erection of 120 dwellings, and it includes hard and soft landscaping, public open space, play areas, vehicle parking and supporting infrastructure. The application includes details of appearance, landscaping, layout and scale, and access was granted as part of the outline permission at Planning Committee in September 2015. So the site is immediately adjacent to Avalana Place, which is referred to as Phase 1, and that is currently under development. And the site is outlined in red on the plan, and it was formerly a commercial orchard. The nearest residential properties are those along Ipswich Road, which are shown in that location, and obviously the ones that are in the process of being built, some of which have been built within Phase 1. So these are some photographs of the site which you would have seen. So that's looking towards the access point and into the site. And again, that's looking across the site. And a further one looking towards the site and towards the boundary along this with Ipswich, the properties in Ipswich Road. And that is looking out of the site in towards the proposed construction site, or the existing construction site, as I should say. So the layout is in 4 parts, which is shown in this location. And each of the parts are separated by areas of green space. It proposes 120 dwellings, 20 which are 2-bed houses, 31 3-bed houses, 41 4-bed houses, 6 5-bed houses, and 7 2-bed affordable houses, and 15 1-bed affordable apartments. So there is a mixture of sizes of properties throughout the site. The net density is 30 dwellings per hectare, and the gross density brings it down to 17.4 dwellings per hectare. And it's considered to be a density which is in keeping with the adjacent development and the character of the surrounding area. So this looks at Part A, which is this section here, just so you can see it in more detail. All dwellings have adequate off-street parking, and all properties face onto the public realm. The report refers to some gardens being below the standards, and these are the ones indicated by a yellow triangle. And in terms, but given the amount of open space, well, the ancillary open space, and the proximity of these properties to the formal open space within the site, it's considered that this deficit would not be sufficient to warrant a reason for refusal, and that adequate amenity space is provided. The affordable housing units are outlined in red, and from a design perspective, these appear the same as other dwellings within the development. And the relationship between the properties on Ipswich Road is considered acceptable given the back-to-back distance and the intervening vegetation. So in terms of sort of Part B, which is this top corner, it's surrounded by green space, and in terms of parking, it meets the council standards, and yet there's one dwelling which is below the recommended garden size. And again, Part C has a similar layout, sort of surrounded by open space, and in terms of parking garden sizes, every property meets the required standards. And that shows Part D in more detail, and again, all properties meet the council's adopted standards for parking and garden sizes. So this is just a plan that indicates the different types of materials. The colours indicate the various materials, and it's just to indicate to you that there will be a mix of materials, and it's considered that the type of materials proposed is acceptable, and the mix will ensure variety and visual interest across the development. This shows the storey height, so this indicates that all the properties, including the flats, would be 2-storey buildings with single-storey garages. Again, 2-storey is considered acceptable given that the predominantly nature of the surrounding development is 2-storey in height. So this shows the landscaping proposals, and as mentioned, it provides adequate open space within the site, and this is the area of open space which is referred to in the recommended condition and again on the update sheet. So I'm not going to show you all the elevations because we'll be here all night, but here's a sample of predominantly the front elevations of the dwelling shown. So you can see that there is a variety in the designs, and whilst they're all 2-storey, there is a mix of heights and roof designs which will create variety. Again, this shows some more mixtures. You will note from the report that given that the site is on the boundary with Colchester District, we've consulted Colchester Borough Council, and their issues are dealt with in the report, but one of them was regards to the materials that were used, and they had concerns about the different material change within the side elevations, and these just illustrate that case. I mean, it's officers' view that this is not sufficient to warrant a reason for refusal, and hence our recommendation within the report. So these are some of the street scenes. So you can see that how the mix of materials would work within the street scene and how the variety of dwellings would work. Officers consider that each design is acceptable, and together it would create a pleasing development. And again, that shows some more key elevations. So the recommendation for approval this evening, and it's subject to the conditions set out in the report. Thank you.
Good evening, Chair and members. I'm Jennifer Carroll and I work for Stratton Parker. I'm the planning agent acting on behalf of Bellway Homes. As you know, Bellway Homes are a successful national house builder that are delivering and building out a number of sites across the region, including Phase 1 adjacent to the former Betts factory. As you've also been made aware by the officer's report, the outline planning permission was granted for up to 120 dwellings, along with associated landscaping, public open space and access in March 2016, following the Planning Committee's resolution to grant in September. The application before you seeks approval of reserved matters in accordance with the parameters of the outline consent and includes details of appearance, landscaping, layout and scale which were not previously determined. The focus of this application has been to ensure consistency between both Phases 1, which is currently being built out, and Phase 2. Bellway, as a developer, put a lot of time into understanding an area and are keen to maintain their reputation of working constructively with parish and district councils. We trust this application is a positive example of their approach and one that is welcomed by the council. In this instance, Bellway held a number of pre-application meetings with officers at tendering and also met with the parish council before submitting the final scheme for consideration. As a result of our engagement before and during the determination period, we are pleased to receive the favourable recommendation by officers and note that no objections from the parish council or other statutory consultees have been made. As the officer has already commented, the development itself provides a mix of dwellings and a generous level of open space. It does also include the delivery of 22 1- and 2-bedroom affordable dwellings, which is in accordance with the Section 106 agreement. The density is very low, set at 17 dwellings per hectare, which fits the character of Phase 1 and has been considered acceptable by your officers. We have also included a robust separation from the rear boundaries of properties along IPSWICH Road, Plains Farm Close and Willow Close. The open space provided throughout the site is also incorporated within the detailed landscaping proposals, which has been incorporated to ensure it's an attractive scheme for both residents and members of the public. The mix and details are as a result of the consultation and comply with the council policies. We have carefully considered the layout to ensure that there is no impact on important species and habitats, and all impacts on landscape have been addressed. As a result, as already stated, there have been no objections from Natural England, and all professional consultees support the application, including the Highway Authority. We hope you'll support the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It is covered in para 620 or 32 on your report about this question of broadband. I can't really believe that here we are in 2017 and we're not specifying that all properties should have broadband. But you see the explanation that's there. And I shall ask the officer to have a think about that, whether there's anything we can do about that at this late stage, although it wasn't, as I understand, spelt for in the outline. And the other question, again for thoughts while you're debating, is who looks after this public open space? Who's responsible for it by 2020 and who's going to maintain it? I won't say any more. I'll leave that one for discussion and then open to councillors. Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Chairman. It will be no surprise to you that I will be mentioning about the garden space for the 13 properties. If the officer can go back to the whichever one it was, the first one will do. No, the next one. Thank you. That obviously shows part of the plot. I noticed that 6 of the 22 affordable units are under the required standard. I'd just like to know by how much, and I do appreciate there's a huge bit of open space at the bottom. And if the officer can refresh my memory, I'm sure I read it somewhere that normally affordable housing isn't all in the same place. I thought it had to be spread across the development, but I may be wrong. If that can be clarified, please. Thank you.
Right, Councillor Alexander.
I was just picking up on Councillor Baker, basically. I must say that I was very impressed when I went there for their regard on health and safety, and also the way they looked at the SSSI for the bullet wood there and the 15-metre extension. As I say, I'm very impressed by that. I'm a little bit concerned by that. It tends to be the pieces at the end, the people who are going to be living there, but I'll leave that for the other members to add theirs, and then if I may, if I'd like to come back. However, I'm going to be honest, if it came to it, I would be prepared to propose this.
Thank you. Councillor McWilliams.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to agree with my colleague, Councillor Baker, regarding the site density and also the positioning of the affordable housing. But can I just confirm with the officer, you said about conditions, because you look here, there aren't any conditions, but is that because they've all now been discharged? Looking here at the DISCON, and they've all been discharged according to the applications. Is that, am I reading that correctly?
In terms of the conditions, sorry, just trying to find the. In terms of the conditions, the ones on the outline consent have either been discharged or in the process of being discharged, and they would still apply. And as with regards to this application, we are proposing one additional condition, which is that the open space, which is this area, is provided prior to first occupation.
I just wanted to confirm that there is only the one condition there, but the others have now all been discharged. Thank you.
Right. I'll carry on, and then there'll be a whole series of questions, I'm sure. Councillor Heaney.
Oh, right. Oh, well, I'll go first and then. I'm also concerned about the lack of garden size. I mean, I know it's a very low density development, but that shouldn't make private garden space is quite different from all this open space. People spend much more time in their private space than they do wandering around outside unless they've got dogs or something like that. And if the gardens are too small, there's always problems with children kicking footballs or whatever. And the other thing I want to know is, what do the ones are there? I can't remember whether they're being gifted or they're affordable. Do they look like the other houses, which is my great thing? And I can't believe that Bellway is not going to put in proper broadband. I mean, surely they'll not be able to sell their new houses without it. It would be in their own interest to put it in.
Right. I'm going to ask Councillor Holmes and then ask the officer to sum.
Yeah, it's more than a comment, really. While we was there today, we spoke to the person that was showing us round, and at the moment, the open space that should have been opened for phase 1 is not. It's now at the moment it's a compound. I did ask him about why, because it's stated in there that it should have been from first house occupied, and he didn't give me any reasons as to why it was where it was, but he did say that it's going to be moved now, and it will be moved and reinstated by roughly spring next year. So I was quite happy with that for the ones that are already there.
Thank you. I've got one or two speakers. Do you want to take some of the points that have been raised so far, and then we'll carry on? Right, then Councillor Bennison next.
Thank you, Chairman. Going back to the broadband, Colchester Borough Council raised the issue, saying that the enhanced broadband facilities that are to be installed as part of the proposed phase of development should be enabled to serve the existing properties provided in phase 1. So they've not even been provided for phase 1 yet, even though they've been promised. So goodness knows when they'll be provided for phase 2. I wouldn't buy a house if it didn't have broadband. So I just wonder, you know, if we can find out when that is going to be enabled. Thank you.
Right, Councillor Everett.
My question was related to that, as to whether we can actually add a condition that broadband should be put in.
Right, that's the end of the list of people I've got, so I'll ask Suzanne if she can pick some of those points up.
Right, I'll try and pick all of them up, but no doubt you'll remind me if I miss anything. In terms of the broadband, the site has got some form of broadband. I believe it's the fibre optic broadband that is yet to be provided. There has been indications that it will be provided, but given that there is no planning conditions on the outline consent, there is no way that we at this stage can put a condition on to ensure that it is done. That would have been something that should have been on the outline phase, so there's nothing that we can do at this stage to ensure that will be done, although the developers have indicated that it will be done. In terms of the public open space and how it will be maintained, the section 106 in relation to the outline requires it to be transferred to the council with a maintenance a sum for maintenance of 120,000, and that's secured through the 106 at the outline stage. And relating to that, I think it's a question that Councillor Holmes raised with regards to the provision of the open space. There is a trigger in the 106 which does require it to be provided upon the occupation of no more than 90 dwellings, so it is something that we can ensure will be, that if members felt necessary we could investigate further, but in terms of this phase, the condition has been recommended to ensure that it's done prior to first occupation of this phase.
And the full-time maintenance of this once it's occupied, is there anything in there?
Sorry?
In the 106 to say...
It will be transferred to the council.
To the council?
Yes, yeah. In terms of the design of the affordable units, they don't look any different to the other dwellings, and I believe from memory one of the blocks, maybe one of the top two, but certainly these elevations include those of the affordable housing. And I think I covered the question about conditions, that all the conditions on the outline consent would still apply. The location of the affordable housing, it has been agreed with our housing department that it is acceptable as shown. And in terms of the garden sizes, there's actually, the adopted policy, our adopted policy, refers, all those that are under two-bedroom properties. The adopted guidance, our adopted plan, HG9, refers to two beds having 75 square metres. And this is in excess of the Essex Design Guide requirement, which requires the properties to have, two-bed properties to have 50 square metres. So in terms of, if I run through what the garden sizes are, did you particularly want to know just the affordable or all the ones that are under?
In my case, just the affordable.
Okay, so we'll start from there and then...
Richard wants to say something.
Yeah. I just think that's...
So this plot here has got 51, and then 50, 55 and 59, so along that row.
Can I just ask the other ones too, how much land are they?
Okay, I'll go through all of them.
Thanks.
This property here has a communal of area of 150, where there's a requirement of 200. Sorry, and that triangle is actually, sorry, in the wrong place. That should be just on this one, and that is 53. And in terms of the others, 59 and 72. And then with these ones, you've got 66, 70, 57, 64, 67, and 74.
So what should they have been?
75.
What, even the 51 should have been 75?
Yeah, if you look at our adopted standards, it should be 75. The Essex Design Guide sets out a 50 square metre requirement.
Right, now Councillor Everett's been indicating urgently to get in, so...
Thank you, Chair. It is related to the affordable housing. I'm concerned that, probably overhamming it here, that we're creating a ghetto in this place here, and that it would be more normal practice to spread the affordable housing across the whole of the area, across parts A, B, C and D. I'd like to explore whether it is actually possible for us to make condition that would say that they should be distributed equally across the parts, and that they should have as near as to possible compliance with garden sizes as possible.
Our standard design gardens rather than the Essex design standard. Right, that's
in response to that, the location of them has been, well, it's been agreed with our housing department that they're happy with the actual proposing the of the affordable housing. So I think it's too late. Given that agreement, it would not be reasonable for the planning committee to make changes to that. And there was another part of the question, but I've forgotten, I'm afraid. Sorry.
It's the size of the gardens, but don't worry about it.
Okay.
Right. Further questions? No further questions. Then I look for a proposal. Councillor Baker.
Chairman, having listened to everything the officers said, although I have concerns about the size of the gardens, there is a huge bit of open space. There's also the wood. There's open space, I'm presuming, in phase one. Well, this is between phase 1 and phase 2. Like I say, although I have concerns, I would propose that we accept the recommendation that the officers given, which is for approval.
And a seconder. Right. It's all right. I'll take further decisions before I take the vote. Councillor Alexander?
I did actually say at the beginning I was minded to...
You did indeed. Yes, yes, you did indeed. I'm sure Councillor Baker would stand down if you would. Right. Now, no, as Councillor McWilliams said, there's no conditions. Are there anything that we further think ought to be in those?
Oh, Councillor Baker wants to say something.
Yes, Councillor
Chairman,
Baker.
if I may make a comment on that. Having read some of the objections, there was great play made on the fact that the open space wasn't provided when it should have been done for phase 1. I know we're not determining that now. So I think this should be closely monitored, that open space to be provided, not prior to first occupation, but prior to first brick being laid.
Yes, Suzanne, comment on that.
Yeah, I think in terms of requiring it, sort of the first brick to be laid, I mean, my view would be that would be unreasonable because there's no occupiers to use that open space. Has to be a reasonable trigger.
It's not this application.
I mean, I think the issue is there is a trigger within the 106,
right.
and we can investigate whether that trigger has been passed, and we can do that through our enforcement team can do that.
Yeah. Councillor McWilliams, you indicated. No, that's fair enough. So let's get this all right. Councillor Alexander's the proposer and Councillor Baker's the seconder. Right. That we accept it exactly as the recommendation was, i.e. to approve it. I'm going to ask you to vote on it then. Now, all those in favour, please show. That is unanimous. Thank you for that. That application is accepted. Right. We will now move then on to A4, which is planning application 17/01 686 full at SKIGHAUGH, Clacton Road, Stones Green. Alison's taking the chair this time. Right.
Thank you. So this application is for a replacement dwelling and change of use of agricultural land to residential in Stones Green. This is the application site. So at the moment it's a semi-detached pair, and they want to demolish one half and to erect a detached property within the plot and to use this area, which is currently agricultural land, as extended garden. This shows you the site. So this would be the area that they would extend to garden, which is carried on in line with the neighbours opposite. And this is the existing semi-detached pair. That's the existing property. And that's the land that is proposed to be extended as garden. So that plan shows you that they would like to demolish you can just about see it in yellow there, the existing property. They'll build a small extension onto the remaining neighbouring house, which would comprise a cycle store at the bottom and storage above. I'll show you that in the elevations. And then to build a detached property here. And then this would be the extended curtilage. This would become part of their garden. These are the proposed elevations. You can see from the original pictures that it's been designed to be more in keeping with the existing property, with the use of cat slide dormer windows and the Dutch hips on the roof. There has been a delegated decision on this back in March where we refused an application for the same type of development. It was on design grounds. I'll show you those elevations in a moment, but it's officer's opinion that those design grounds have all been overcome through these amended plans. This shows you the refused application previously. So the reasons for refusal, previously there was no concern with the extended garden, so that was deemed to be completely acceptable. The reasons for refusal were the higher eaves height in this proposed property, the pitched roof dormers being out of keeping with the cat slide dormers on the existing property, and a deep projecting rear element. And this is a street scene, so this shows you the refused proposal at the top here. We can see these awkward pitched roof dormers, and they've now been altered to a cat slide in keeping with the existing. We've got this small extension on the side so that they both appear as detached houses with Dutch hips on. And the eaves have been dropped so that they're in line with the existing property, whereas previously you had quite a raise above the window, which made it more dominant in relation to the remaining property. So in our opinion, it's overcome all those reasons for refusal. There was one reason for refusal, that the deep projecting element of the rear, which is still 4.8 metres as it was originally, which is this element here, which is unchanged. In the proposal here, the dormer windows have changed to be cat slide, which is more in keeping. But when you look at the street scene here, you can see that the properties over here have been extended quite significantly, so the rear projection wouldn't be harmful with the detailed design of the front of the property, more in keeping with the neighbour. So these are the floor plans of the proposed property, and this just shows you the neighbouring existing property to remain, and the extension here which would sort of balance the roof off, so it just gives a ground floor cycle store here and a small staircase up to some eaves storage space. So the proposal is considered to overcome the previous reasons for refusal, so it's recommended for approval subject to the conditions in the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now the ward member who brought this to our attention, Councillor Bush.
Good evening, Chairman, members and officers. Firstly, I'm a little surprised this application that was refused in March has now been minded to be approved. In particular, obviously, one of the reasons for the refusal was demolition of half the semi-detached property, and the construction of a detached dwelling would have been unsympathetic and appear incongruous with the rural location setting, creating a detrimental impact on the street scene. So what has materially changed? In an effort to reflect a street scene that is balanced and sympathetic with this rural setting, the applicant has submitted speculative and cosmetic changes to the external appearance of the proposed new detached dwelling, whilst attaching a carbuncle on the other half of the adjacent existing semi-detached property in the form of a ground floor cycle store and a first floor store. This application is also inclusive and an extension of its residential curtilage of the property from a classified agricultural land piece. These semi-detached properties date back to the early 1900s. Timber frame, raft floor, farm cottages that were built specifically for farm workers, and they do have some historical merit. Demolition in part could impact on the structural integrity and cause potential latent damage to the effective adjacent dwelling. Also, the character and appearance will also dramatically and adversely be changed. The adjacent elderly neighbour is in her 80s and has lived in this property for over 60 years. She would have never contemplated that buying that property, they would be severed and endure stresses and part demolition, reconstruction, adding an appendage which will remain under the ownership of the applicant. I am of the opinion that this application, if approved, would significantly reduce the value of the property, as well as causing stress and impact on her health. I suppose technically and hypothetically speaking, this application could be considered outside the settlement boundary and not include an emerging local plan. And I state this observation as a part of this applicant's property, proposed cycle store and first floor store, will remain attached to the dwelling, therefore deeming number 4 SKIGHAUGH, the adjacent property, still being semi-detached, while a new detached property being classed as an additional dwelling in the village. Members, having that you visited the site earlier today and experienced this rural setting, observing how these farm cottages provide a natural balanced street scene and complement the vista, not just from the approach to SKIGHAUGH Lane, but from the distance to Clacton Road as you drive down and observe. I hope that you share my concerns and views and reasons to strongly oppose this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bush. And looking, I am sure the agent of the applicant, Mr. Legree, welcome.
Evening, Chairman, members. I was not involved in the original application, which was refused, and I have to say I completely agree with the officer's view to refuse that application at that time. But following that refusal, I was asked to look at the application and made it clear to the applicant that he needed to do considerable alterations to the building. Particularly in regard to the flank wall. Now, in actual fact, I've been involved in a similar case at Great Totham in Malden District a couple of years or so ago, where a similar proposal was refused by the Planning Committee in that time. We actually won the appeal and the costs against the council because the council referred to the concerns and issues affecting the neighbouring property, who also was an elderly person. And whilst I can understand those particular concerns for the neighbour, unfortunately, they go beyond the planning legislation. They are private matters between the two parties. Equally, the issue of structural stability, which I don't believe is a concern in this instance, but the issue of structural stability is covered by other legislation and, again, not the planning side of things. However, I did recommend to the applicant that he did make those considerable changes, and those being endorsed and seen on the screen before you. Just a point to mention, that it's not an extension to the neighbouring property, it's actually the alteration to part of the existing building. Admittedly, that has to incorporate a new hipped gable roof, but it isn't an extension to it. It is reworking of the existing building. Also, in paragraph 6.17 of your report, there's mention about the building not being in a poor condition. If members had actually looked inside the building today, they would have seen that it's propped up with acro props. There are considerable issues within the building, and the applicant, in fact, commenced refurbishment of the building, but that's now been shown to be unviable, hence why these proposals have come about. I certainly cannot agree with Councillor Bush's comments about this being incongruous in the street scene, rural character and so on. We've gone to great lengths to reflect the character of the existing properties. They're not listed, they're not of any local list or any historical value at all, although there are clearly some age. I would also question the issue about the value of the property. Yes, it's true there will be still a cycle store attached to the neighbour's property, but otherwise, for all intents and purposes, it will become a detached building. But more importantly, from a planning perspective, you're looking at a development that is very, very similar to the existing properties along that road, which also have been altered to some degree. And whilst this is not absolutely identical to the other half of the semi, nevertheless, it is very much reflective of what else you can see in that particular road. So I do believe that this is a scheme that is appropriate in that particular setting, and therefore ask you to support the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right. I'll ask the officer if she's got any comments to make on either of the two speakers.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd just like to confirm that the site is outside the settlement boundary, but because it's a replacement dwelling, a one-for-one replacement dwelling in the countryside, it's acceptable in policy terms as set out in the report, which is why the report steps through the different stages that make it acceptable. So we don't treat it as we would a new dwelling in the countryside because there's no additional dwelling created. It's just a one-for-one replacement. and the comments in relation to structural stability, again, as Mr Legree said, will be covered by building regulations, not planning matters.
Right. Councillor Haley.
Well, I'm not sure that Mr Legree's other property in Malden, when taken down, had a sort of still part belonging to the other, the new house attached to it, which is extraordinary here, I find. And if it's in bad condition, the other house will be in bad condition. So what's going to happen to it when the bashing and the crashing and the, taking down of half the house, what effect will it have on the other house? This 80-year-old ladies probably don't have an awful lot of money to keep their houses in good condition. And the other point I'd like to make is that it's a timber frame house, and if they've got this unheated bit attached to the end, which will become damp, it won't be very good for the old lady, will it? And I thought there was something in planning legislation that if it has a really detrimental impact on the neighbour's residential amenity, that could be taken into account. But I'll have to ask the officer for that, or the...
Right, let's have some further points, and then we'll ask the officer to reply on them. Yes, Councillor Benison.
Thank you. Could the officer clarify what state this building is in currently? This morning I was told that the owners were living in it, and we've just heard from the agent that it's held up with acro props. So what is the actual state of it?
Thank you. To be honest, this isn't my application, so I'm presenting it for another officer, so I haven't been inside the building. His comments are at paragraph 6.17 saying it's not in a poor state of repair, but when we make an assessment on a replacement dwelling, as you can see from paragraph 6.17, it says that it wouldn't replace an existing permanent dwelling which is capable of reasonable improvement and extension and which makes a positive contribution to local character. In this case, it's obviously an attractive cottage, but it's not something in planning terms that we would say was such a positive contribution to local character that we would object to its demolition as you would a positive building within a conservation area. So we wouldn't object in principle to its demolition, even if it was structurally sound, because it's not such a positive building in design terms.
No further.
Yes, Mr. Holmes.
Councillor Holmes.
Yeah. The house that he's going to build is, if you could put that back to, I think, one. That's it. No. The one which draws a comparison to the other one. No. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's it. The house that's going to be built has got 2 cat-slide dormers on it now. This one on this side is the original house with the side bit on it. So, as far as I'm concerned, it's not like for like. It's not one for one, is it? It's a detached house for a semi-detached that's not even a semi-detached because they're leaving half of it there. I can't see how you can... And it's outside the area, the development area, and it's... The size it is now makes it look like the size that this one is with a bit added on the end. So it's just wrong. It looks wrong, and I think it looks totally out of character. So that's all I've got to say.
All right. Councillor Everett.
Sorry, can you leave me for a minute?
Right. Okay, while you consider it.
Can I get back and make a comment? If nobody else
Yeah,
wants to
go
comment?
on. Yeah.
I mean, I would like to make the point that it's still a semi-detached house, because, which Councillor Holmes was picking up on, because, well, there's a bit belonging to somebody else sticking on the end of it. And so it's not a detached house. When she comes to sell it, she won't be selling the cycle store or whatever it is on the end. She'll be selling a semi-detached house. And so when they buy the house, the other people sell their house, they'll be selling part of a semi-detached house, and then they'll be selling their own house. So it just makes a nonsense to me.
Councillor Baker.
I wouldn't say I'm confused, but Within the executive summary of this report, the application was refused due to the significant detrimental visual impact upon the rural character of the surrounding area, and the officer mentioned that that was due to the size and the fact it didn't look right. Well, I can't see how this is any different, because you're losing half a house, putting some sort of storage on it, so it's not going to look like a semi-detached house at all, and sticking a detached house next to it, and it's not going to look the same as the house next door at all. So I have great difficulty in sort of supporting the recommendation to approve at the moment. Thank you.
Councillor Everett wants to come back now.
Councillor Everett.
Thank you for that break. The bit that's stuck onto the edge of the existing dwelling, has there been an application to change its use from residential to another use? And if that isn't the case, if it remains as residential and therefore could be occupied, surely this is an additional dwelling, not a replacement dwelling.
Good point.
Yeah.
Yes, I think.
Right, I'll just come back on Councillor Heaney's point initially about the harm to residential amenity from the cycle stall being attached. It's not an uncommon situation where people have shared garages, where you have a double garage built and one property has one side and one has the other. You've obviously got no control over the use as long as it's ancillary to residential use, which is proposed here. So it's not a material planning consideration. The comment about the one-for-one replacement, that you've got a semi-detached house and then you've got a detached house, it's just the number of dwellings, basically. When you're looking at an unsustainable location in the countryside, we don't want to increase the number of dwellings, which you're not here. You're demolishing a house, a semi-detached house, making it detached, and then giving it an ancillary outbuilding, which is just unusually attached to the neighbour. So it's like it can just
be used by the original owners, the ones on the right-hand side.
No, it's still in the new dwelling's ownership, as a shared garage would be, but it's attached to the house. So it couldn't be a separate.
Part of the semi-detached house.
But it's
in the party wall.
It's not a one-for-one, is it? I mean, if they was going to do anything, demolish it all and build on the same site and go back. I mean, I can't see the problem with that. Why leave that there and then build another property? That's exactly what they're doing. It cannot be one-for-one unless they take all of that away.
But this element isn't a dwelling, it's an ancillary element to the house. It's as if they'd tacked a garage block.
It's a dwelling, so they could just move as many holes in there as they want, and it made no difference. You couldn't stop them.
You could stop. You couldn't have any independent residential use in there. It would be a material change of use. You create a new planning unit if that was to be used as a sort of one-bed flat or something we could enforce against. No, that's an ancillary space, as a garden shed would be, or as a garage. It couldn't be used as a separate dwelling.
But it's not attached to anything of theirs. It's attached to next door. You can't have it something belonging to somebody else attached to yours.
But you could be
so I can go and build on a house next door to mine then, and I can just put a shed on it.
Yeah.
And say, that's mine.
You can, as long as you comply with the Party Wall Act. It's not a planning matter to go up to your boundary. You can't cross your boundary; it would be trespass. But to build up to it.
Your boundary. Yeah.
And there was another comment made about not matching next door. Obviously, there's no design requirement to match next door. I think the intention here is we had a design objection here, and they've tried to make the properties appear more similar by putting this hip on. The reason for refusal, if I can just specify initially, it did not say that there was an objection to a detached house. There was no objection to demolishing the house and detaching it. It was those matters that I spelt out in relation to the eaves were too high, which have been overcome. The pitched roof dormers were unacceptable, which has been overcome. And the only other issue was the depth, which hasn't changed. But with the changes to the front, it's not something that would be, in my opinion, grounds to refuse on its own. It's in proportion, so that's the refusal. It's in proportion with the existing property. It's got the cat slide dormer.
Councillor Everett.
Which brings me back to my question. I think from what you just told us, that this bit on the end is capable of being used as a residential dwelling. So therefore, if it is used as a residential dwelling, then this is an additional dwelling that we are proposing here, not a one-for-one replacement.
It was, sorry if there's confusion, it would not be able to be occupied as a separate dwelling, because you would then create a new planning unit. You'd have two independent dwellings. The permission is for a replacement dwelling, a one-for-one dwelling. If members' concern relates solely to this element, we could issue a split decision in refusing this element if you felt there were significant grounds to do so, but we'd need a condition to know how they would treat the end wall to the neighbour. Because it seems that the issue seems to revolve around this cycle store.
Right, Councillor Holmes.
Sorry to keep on about this, but I'm going back to it again. The demolishing part of a semi-detached and building as detached, well away from the other one, and they're also asking for an extra 35-metre curtilage as well, which we haven't even come to yet. It's not one for one. It's not a property for a property. You say the number is one, but it's not. It's 3/4 and 1, right? And it's also, if they want to knock down one, knock it down and build it next door to it. They want to go back, extend it, stick it up in the air a little bit more, whatever they want. But this is not one for one. And I'd like to know what they're doing wrong, because that's not right. In planning terms, or whatever terms, I'd like to know exactly how they can do that.
To us, it's black and white. It's a replacement dwelling. You've got the existing dwelling is there in yellow. You cannot build the new dwelling without knocking this down, because it sits partly on its footprint. I mean, sometimes if we had a replacement dwelling over here, then we would put a condition that this has to be demolished before that's occupied to ensure that you don't get two dwellings in the countryside, but that wouldn't be necessary here because it physically sits on its footprint. This part wouldn't be capable of independent occupation, but we could put a condition on that must only be used ancillary to the main residence.
But it's still a detached for a semi.
It is, but that's acceptable.
Why? We don't believe it is. We don't believe it should be. We're the committee.
I know.
I know you're all laughing at me.
No. We're agreeing with you.
No,
it's not.
I just cannot see how someone can get away with that. When to build a conservatory, I have to go through God knows what just to build a conservatory, and this is totally out of the area, out of the
keeping everything.
Settlement boundary.
The settlement boundary. Yeah. So they're starting a precedent by doing that. You're starting a precedent building it outside the boundary. They get the curtilage, 2 more next year, the year after. It doesn't matter when. It's not a point that we can say anything about it, because we can't. But it can be mentioned, as far as I'm concerned. It's a precedent.
I'm going to put 2 pence in, because looking at this drawing, obviously they want a bigger property. But the way they've got the bigger property is building the extension at the back. Now, why couldn't they build that on the existing building and save a complete new build? That would be my query on it. Now that I've got a list there, Councillor Heaney.
You can put as many conditions on as you like on that, but are you going to go inside and see whether somebody's put a loo in there? And, you know, it could make a nice little 1-bedroom place with a bedroom upstairs and a place downstairs and a loo in the bedroom or something, or a loo downstairs. You're never going to stop people living in there, however many conditions you put on, if they feel like letting it to somebody. So you end up with 3 houses, whatever anybody says.
Right. Councillor Baker next.
Thank you, Chairman. Not only are we debating about the replacement dwelling, but we're also asked to consider and approve change of use of the agricultural land to residential. It's quite a large area to transfer from agricultural to residential. So I would like to know, if possible, what grade agricultural land that actually is, please. Thank you.
All right. While we're searching for that, Councillor Fowler.
Thank you, Chairman. I stood and looked at this morning and thought, OK, this is an interesting one. Now, looking at it from the point of view of the neighbour next door, which I know isn't a consideration, I'm sure that that is a matter between them and the other party, but I put myself in their shoes for a little while and then put myself in the shoes of the applicant. If that was me applying for that, how would I feel about that? How would I think about that? Which way around? Well, the odd part, the end part, which is the new part of the, which would be the semi-detached, that's the, yes, well, you nearly had it there. That seems to be the problem. That's the part that is the issue. As to whether that is one for one, as Councillor Holmes said, which it isn't, is it? Because it's too small to be one for one. Now, unfortunately, the more I've looked at it, the more I've thought that if that was me, I would accept that and I'd be happy to support it. Thank you, Chairman.
Right. Councillor Alexander.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I've listened to everyone's debate with some interest. When I arrived at the site visit this morning with you all, what I saw was a typical sort of country scene, two pretty little houses sitting in the middle of a piece of land and the application before us. Now, if I'm not mistaken, they pay at this moment domestic rates for that whole building. So if you chop this building in half and cut and shut it and move it away, you will still have a residential building left. Now, that's how I see it. I know it's like in black and white to you, but it isn't to us, because you come from a clinical approach to the planning as laid down before you. For us, it's a different way. We have to look at it from many other different facets, while adhering strictly to as much planning policy as we can. So the decision before us, if this wasn't controversial, it wouldn't be brought before it in the first place. So I do sympathise with Councillor Hunt, and I could see where it was going. I didn't find him funny in any way, shape or form, quite frankly. It's difficult enough doing this job. I can actually see where Councillor Heaney is coming from, yes. How are you going to stop this? How are you going to monitor it? And there's a final point. The person who lives next door, because at the end of the day, we are elected by the people of Tendring to protect and look after them and to make sure we deliver what they want on our behalf. That is our criteria, and we sign up to that. I don't believe that if we go ahead with this, we will be doing that on behalf of one single person, because everybody counts for the good of all.
All right, Councillor Benison.
Thank you. This is going back quite a while to something that Alison Rowland said about the material change of use. I can't remember what you were talking about now, but it struck me at the time that we are looking at a material change of use for the right-hand cottage that's being demolished and being turned into a store rather than a residential home. You're saying that it can't be used as residential. It can only be used as a store. So that should be, surely, a material change of use. Can you explain further to me, please?
Yes, so dwellings fall within a C3 use class. So both existing pairs are C3. If you demolish half, rebuild it somewhere else, it's still a dwelling, it's still a C3 use class. And any sheds or summer houses, anything that you've got in the garden are technically within that dwelling use class, but they're ancillary to that main house, that number 53 or whatever. So if you demolish a semi-detached house, you've just physically picked up that house and you've moved it, and that is the main planning unit on the site, and anything else to it is ancillary. So, in our opinion as planning officers, that would clearly be treated exactly as we'd treat a garden shed. So any independent use of it, so if they wanted to try and convert it to a one-bed flat or something like that, then that would be a new planning unit, like it would if they had a garage block that they then converted to a flat, or it would be treated exactly the same. It's a really unusual situation where they've tacked it onto the side of the neighbour's house, which makes it appear a lot more complicated than it is, but in planning terms it's still black and white. It would just be treated as an ancillary garden structure, and if they tried to use it as an independent dwelling, then we could enforce against it. It would be an automatic material change of use that would need planning permission that we can enforce against. Because you would then have two dwellings. You'd have that main dwelling that you've moved, and then you could only have something ancillary in its place. Just to come back on the agricultural land, we don't know the agricultural classification, but on such a small scale, you've lost this part of this larger field. It wouldn't be material grounds to refuse it on loss of high-grade agricultural land if it was so.
The list is building. I'll put two pennies in before I even go to this list. I've got the results for refusal last time, right in front of me. And I know Councillor Bush had looked at it as well. And I can't see, in my own mind, simple mind, quite when the recommendation was refused last time, how really structurally it's altered this time. But I'm sure the officer will correct me. Now, Linda is next. Councillor McWilliams.
Thank you, Chairman. I was actually going to come around to that, what you're saying now, because we are obviously having a great problem here. And John, I admire you for the way that you're sticking by what you say. Okay, so, and well done on that. But it is deciding what we actually are going to do. There's obviously, Councillor Fowler has said that she would support refusal, but we need reasons for refusal, and we need to know. You did.
She'd approve.
Sorry, I'm deaf in one ear again. Beg your pardon. But we do need to know the reasons. If we are minded to go for refusal, we need to know what we're looking at. And I'm not sure about how we can approve approve the existing property without that extra bit added onto it, because it just looks out of character. And I agreed with the officers and their view on that. There's just too many questions still in my mind at the moment.
Sorry, John. Can I just say, is it the one that they're building now, the detached, is it the same size exactly as the one that they're knocking down? Does it have to be? Is it got to be one for one? One down, one up.
No, it's one dwelling for one dwelling, so it could be a two-bed dwelling demolished and a
20-bedroom, even though it's outside of the area.
If it meets the criteria, which does go through whether it's overdevelopment of the site, whether it's intrusive on the skyline, that would prevent
So in 5 years' time, they could say, right, I want to demolish that one, move another big one over that side, knock this one down, but I only want to knock half of it down, and carry on right the way along the road. I mean, you know, it's got to stop somewhere, and I believe it should stop here.
That's okay. First of all, I just wanted to comment on the difference of opinion, I think, with the planning officers and the committee on this one. And nobody at all is ever underestimates the position that the committee is in. As you know, the officers have to present to you their professional opinion based on the policies, you know, the legislation, and as we've already seen on 2 previous applications this evening, as a committee you will disagree with those officer recommendations. And, you know, I can see from the debate that this is a similar situation, although it is one of those examples as well where, as Councillor Hone says very passionately, and there's nothing wrong with being passionate, you know, maybe that's why we were smiling rather than what you was actually saying.
Really didn't worry about it.
No, but what I wanted to say was actually to pick up on the point that Councillor McWilliams has just stated. If members are minded to refuse because you don't like it, you know, for whatever reason, you have to come up with some planning reasons that officers can use to defend any challenge if it was brought. Now, that's not us being unreasonable or unhelpful, and I hope that you would agree as a committee that when you give us something to work on, we do come up with some reasons round your thoughts. And this is no disrespect to the committee at the moment. I haven't heard anything that I think could be worked upon, and maybe that's what I'd ask the committee just to focus on with the ongoing debate.
Still got a list, but thank you for that advice. I think one thing that I've heard from here is that we're not too much in favour of it, but that we do agree it's outside the present development limits. That's the first thing I would think. Now, Councillor Everett.
I'd like to bring another issue into this that Councillor Baker referred to earlier, which is in terms of the change of the use of land and the curtilage of the application site. Because we've got the plan up there, the curtilage of the proposed site with the agricultural land included within it. And actually, you just flicked through a whole load of photographs that show that, in fact, it goes a lot deeper into the field than it does. If you look at that one, go back, that one, you can see that the garden actually goes a lot deeper into the field than would be shown on that curtilage. What are the issues around that in terms of the change of use of land and in terms of the veracity of the application?
Right. Yes. Well, I think that's a very good question, and I'm going to ask the officer to do it. And also be mindful that it would appear from the general discussions that the committee is not very much in favour of it, and perhaps the officer can come up with some other reasons other than the boundary why we should object to it. But I'm going to let her answer that, and then, Councillor Baker, I'm coming to your good self.
Thank you. Can I just clarify with Councillor Everett? I think you're saying that this land in the distance you think is deeper than is shown. It does look like it in the photo, but
yes, it's much bigger.
Well, when we were there this morning, it went back.
It clearly is it?
Yeah, it's huge, grassed area.
So
huge grassed area.
To the second stick.
Yeah. Much bigger.
So then that would be something that
about there,
would need to be looked into as an enforcement case, if necessary, to find out how long it's been like that, whether it's become lawful over the passage of time. And it may be that would need to be retained as garden land as well, if that was their intention. But that's not a proposal within the application. But
Can I come back to that, Chair?
Yes, all right. She raised the first one.
What we have in front of us, therefore, isn't a reflection of what's being asked for. And showing the bit to the east and northeast as being the area that would become agricultural land, become residential, in reality, it actually goes a lot further back now.
always thought there was something about the neighbours' residential amenity being really badly affected, the impact on the neighbour.
I did say Councillor Baker for his tuppence, and then Councillor Heaney, so I'll go Councillor Baker first.
Thank you, Chair. It's a question for the officers, so but I'll have to wait, I think.
And so is mine. Yeah, mine is too. But I always thought there was, John, while I was discussing it, there was something about it was badly affecting the neighbour's residential amenity. Isn't that right? Do you know anything like that?
No.
I'm sure it's come across in one or two things, or maybe it was just the discussion.
Whilst the officers are considering that, I'll just read out one of the reasons for refusal last time. It was, as such, the demolition of the existing property and its replacement with a detached dwelling incorporated unsympathetic elements, which would appear incongruous in this location and provide an unbalanced setting in the street scene to the significant detriment of the rural character. Now, to an extent, that has been slightly overcome by altering the roof line, so there wasn't an abrupt fault. It stopped and is shaped. So that was one that was used last time, but there were 5 different reasons at that time, all hinging on policy HD12. And that is policy HD12 talks about the adopted tendering local plan states that proposals for an extension to or a replacement of an existing dwelling outside the defined development boundaries of the settlements will be permitted, provided that the extension or replacement satisfies policies QL9 and 10, and that's talking about size, scale and height being in keeping.
I think
right.
I just picked up on what we're going to say.
Right.
Well done, John.
Good. Okay, let's see where we go from there.
Yeah, if I could just draw your attention to paragraph 6.9. So that talks about the replacement dwelling policy. So that's the most important policy here. So it goes through the different criteria. So if members are wanting to refuse the application, you need to find the criteria there which you're most concerned of. Criteria 1 is size, scale and height in keeping with the character of the locality, and in terms of design and materials would make a positive visual contribution to its setting. I think that one would be a lot more difficult to refuse against with the amendments that we've now had. The second one is well related and in proportion to the original dwelling, which seems to be something that a lot of you have raised as a concern, that you're not happy with the change in character from a semi-detached to a detached. 3, it wouldn't be visually intrusive on a skyline or the open character of the surrounding countryside because it sits next to the existing property. 4, retain sufficient space to protect its setting. Again, it would meet that. It wouldn't represent overdevelopment of the site, wouldn't be detrimental to highway safety. I think it would be very difficult to refuse it on amenity grounds because at the moment you've got a semi-detached house and the comings and goings and noise associated with that adjoining neighbour, and if you're then removing that to a cycle store as proposed, if it's implemented as approved, then it would obviously be a lot quieter. There'd be a lot less comings and goings to that. Number 8, wouldn't replace an existing permanent dwelling which is capable of reasonable improvement and extension and which makes a positive contribution to local character. That's difficult. We don't have any structural evidence to say whether it is sound, so that would be difficult. The others aren't applicable. So I think the best one really would be that whether it's well related and in proportion to the original dwelling, or size, scale and height in keeping with the character of the locality.
Together with the fact that it's outside the development area.
But HD12 specifically allows replacement dwellings outside settlement boundaries.
It does.
So it's those specific points of it.
Only if it's a detached dwelling in the first place, surely there must be some restriction.
Would you like to?
Yeah. Councillor Baker, I'm going to let you come back in and then...
Obviously, we're relying on a safe policy. I'd just like to know how much weight we can afford that, and is it similar in the current submitted local plan, and how much weight we can attribute to that policy, unless there's a wording that's changed at all. Thank you.
Yes.
There isn't, no. The local plan is going the way of all planning policy, that it's supposed to be less specific, so we're not having such specific policies. But this policy refers back to the design policies, which are all carried through into the draft plan in almost exactly the same wording, in terms of something being in size, scale and height in keeping with the character of the area. So those all apply. That your concern is that this would be out of keeping with the existing character, it being semi-detached. And they're all semi-detached in that area. So I think that would be something more to focus on. Just to clarify, HD12 is extensions to or replacement of dwellings outside settlement development boundaries. And it says they'll be permitted, so it's a permissive policy, providing that the extension or replacement satisfies the general design criteria set out in the QL 9 and 10, and then the criteria which we've just gone through in terms of it being in keeping.
Surely the criteria is to have it semi-detached. That's the criteria. Not semi-detached down.
If that's the member's view that that's the strong character of that area and that to detach it is contrary to that character, then we can word a refusal on those grounds.
It's true. I certainly believe it's a complete and absolute carbuncle on that part of the country.
I'm going to ask the solicitor. She's got a set of words that might fit what you're after.
I don't know if John's seen what he said now.
Then it's Councillor Alexander and then Councillor Holmes.
I don't know if they're a set of words, but taking account of the planning officer's advice and members' feeling with regards to the changing from a semi-detached to a detached building, it would appear that the most defendable reason for refusal would be, if you look at 6.11 on page 45, you would be saying that the replacement dwelling is not well related and not in proportion to the original dwelling. And then you could support that as well with second reason, picking up on the size and scale of the replacement dwelling, as Alison just highlighted. I think that one would be a bit more difficult to defend, but if you wish to add it.
Good. Councillor Alexander?
Again, I just want to query, if I may. Did I hear you right by saying there's been no structural survey carried out on the building at all? Did I hear that right?
That's right, yes, but there's no policy requirement to provide a structural survey. It's not in the conservation area, so there's no principal objection to its demolition. It could be demolished today. We've got no control over it.
Building regulations.
They can't use it then, can they? You said something about it being held up.
Pay for the surveyor for people next door.
Chair, can I come back?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, this is in my mind. What age are these buildings we talking about there?
They were beginning
before the war.
about 1900, I think, Councillor Bush said.
Probably about the
1900, I think Councillor Bush said. Yeah,
yes, they were.
They were, you're dead right. Yeah. Back for the war.
After the First World War, a lot of these cottages, including at Lawford and various other places, were built for places for soldiers to come back to.
Well, the reason I asked that, Chair, at that period of time, materials were very short for obvious reasons, and a lot of these buildings were built placing the buildings direct on wooden rafts and pegged in on those weird mushroom-shaped things I've seen. I bought buildings myself with that very structure. And some of these trees that were felled at that time were enormously tall, and they could run through both those buildings. It's just a matter of interest. I thought the committee would like to know.
Councillor Baker.
I appreciate that Lisa's sort of pointed us in the right direction, but I'm just wondering if paragraph 617, where it says, would not replace an existing permanent dwelling which is capable of reasonable improvement and extension and which makes a positive contribution, would that be also a consideration that if we are minded to refuse?
I didn't mention that.
I mentioned that in our opinion it wouldn't be classed as a positive contribution to local character in planning terms. It's a lot stronger refusal will be held on the first two grounds of it being out of character, with the predominantly being detached from semi-detached.
Right. Okay, a lot of chewing and throwing. I've got nobody to speak on my list, so do I get a proposal?
No. That was refusal. It wasn't seconded.
Oh, sorry. Councillor Fowler, you...
I did say that I would be happy to support the application, and in that case I propose approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Right, do I have a seconder for that? Then that proposal falls. Do I have another proposal? The night is young, but I don't want to go on till 11 o'clock.
Chairman, I'll propose that we go against the officer's recommendation and refuse on the grounds that we've already discussed. Thank you.
Yeah.
And Linda seconded
Would
it,
I? I've got a seconder for that. Yes.
I'm sorry, Councillor Baker, but I'm going to have to ask you to be a bit more specific than those that have been discussed, because we've been discussing this for about an hour. So I'm sorry if I'm seeming pedantic, but which reasons?
Would you like me to read what I've jotted down? So it'd be a refusal on HG1 on the grounds that the size and... Sorry, HG12, Part 1, that the size and scale is out of keeping with the character of the locality, and Part 2, that it isn't well related and in proportion to the existing dwelling, being detached rather than semi-detached.
What about without impact on existing streets?
Chairman, just those two, I think, would be sufficient.
Right.
Thank you.
Get too many, it's a problem.
So we're talking about 611 and
610.1.
and I'm hearing 617 as well.
17, what was that? You don't want to include that?
I'm just asking if the proposer wants to include that.
I think the ones that the officer stated are fine. Thank you.
Right. You're happy with that?
We've got a seconder.
Yes. Councillor McWilliams.
Oh, okay.
And there's no amendments to same, to add or withdraw? No? Right. Okay. As long as you know what you're voting for now, it is refusal along those grounds. And I'm going to ask for a show of hands to that effect. And that is not unanimous. So those against, 1. Right. So it is refused with some suitable wording. Right. Yeah. Do you want to go? Yeah, go on.
Thank you. So the application's for change of use of this little unit for storage to a kiosk, which would be an A1 retail use, including some seating area and a replacement fencing. So you will have seen from the site visit, you've got the memorial gardens here, and it sits on top of the public toilets there. And this is the site in red. So this is the little kiosk at the moment. It's just used for storage. It's already in the applicant's under the applicant's lease, but you'll see from my comments on the update sheet that they need landlord consent for these works, separate to any planning permission. TDC Property Services have confirmed that landlord consent has been refused for various reasons which aren't related to planning, such as issues with capacity of the drainage, electricity, that kind of thing. So that is separate to any planning permission that they would need. TDC as operator in terms of the public realm responsible for the gardens and the toilets have also got concerns with the application. That's on the green sheet. So they're saying in relation to adjoining buildings, spaces and views that the proposal is inappropriate and unsympathetic to the appearance and character of the local environment. I'll just show you the sites here. So this area is where they would be having the seating, and the kiosk is very minor changes in terms of openings. This is the existing plan. So there's a set of steps here which are to be removed. And you can see there's just additional openings to go in, and then the seating area to go around the tiny kiosk. There's an additional condition added at condition 4, so that only table and chairs can be sited in this area. The kiosk is so small that there's a very real risk that retail elements, beach paraphernalia, would spill out onto this area, which could have quite significant harm to the conservation area. So they'd need our prior approval for any sort of mobile racking for sales of those sort of things. Condition 3 would have the details of the railings added as well, because they could have quite an impact on the site as it's in the conservation area. In terms of the use, it's a proposed retail use within the town centre in a tourist location, so it's supported in principle. It would boost the tourist potential of the town. The visual changes are very minor. They would preserve the character and appearance of the conservation area. So we've got no concerns on design grounds subject to those additional conditions. So the concerns raised by property services are completely separate to the planning application process, and we would put a note on any planning permission that they need separate landlord consent and that they would need advertisement consent for any signage on the unit as well. So it's a recommendation for approval subject to those additional conditions. Thank you.
I'd like to propose approval of this. I think the other issues that we've just examined are other issues that are not really to do anything with planning. And I don't see anything wrong with this application in planning terms. So I'd like to propose approval.
Sorry, there's somebody who wants to speak.
Oh, I do beg your pardon. Yes, I should have invited the applicant, who's been sitting there very patiently. Yeah, sorry, no Mr. Partridge. You get your usual 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair, members and officers. My name is Mr. Partridge, who submitted this application. Thanks for allowing me to speak this evening. The purpose of the application for a change of use of the existing storage shed is to make better use of an area along the seafront that is pretty ugly at the moment and significantly lets down the immediate area. In recent years, major investment and changes have taken place along the seafront, namely the creation of the eastern beach, and I feel that areas such as the terrace should be used to further encourage visiting tourists rather than remain underused and underdeveloped. It's a fairly large area that would easily accommodate tables and chairs, used daily throughout the holiday season, overlooking the pier and beach and in close proximity to the memorial gardens. Currently, we welcome a variety of customers at the kiosk who can either grab something on the go or take some respite after visiting local attractions. By making better use of the terrace, this will provide a further area that is safe and easily accessible, offering a fantastic panoramic view of the seafront. The storage shed is currently an eyesore, providing little more than an enclosed area to store a few pieces of stock. The replacement of the tired and industrial-looking fencing will also be key to the site receiving the planned investment it deserves. I have a vision to encourage visitors to enjoy the seafront from the terrace's natural vantage point. Regarding the Property Service's recent comments and the landlord consent and the overdrawing of services from the public toilets below, we propose that new services would be installed, namely electric, water and sewerage to be tapped into the main sewer, having zero impact on the public toilets below. That would be subject to landlord consent. If permission were to be granted, I would be required to work closely with TDC to ensure that landlord consent is approved for the final use of the building. I will ensure that all works are sympathetic to the local area, also maintaining the mantra of fun is kept alive, and that the terrace will be another area that the visiting tourists will look back on positively. We've proven over the course of many years that the existing newspaper kiosk by the traffic lights has been well managed within our family, and it's in the very best interest of both TDC and its visitors. The kiosk is one of Clacton's tourist hotspots, and I will ensure that this family commitment continues. I hope that you support the application tonight for the change of use for the storage shed, taking us into 2018 and many more years to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Alexander.
I haven't missed anybody else, so that's it. Yeah. Councillor Everett. Oh, I better ask the officers first.
No,
there's nothing there. I'm going to make a flippant comment at the end of this, but not before. Right. Councillor Everett started, and then I'll take Councillor Alexander.
Just to say, I say what I just said.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as you know, St James is right next door. Literally, you can put your hand across and touch. And in the ensuing boundary changes, it will become a part of my ward. I don't think I need to declare an interest on that quite yet. Tourism is a great thing for us, and it has a huge impact on our area. I have to say it is unsightly, and I'm very much in favour of keeping the high level of tourism. It helps to balance our books, and I'm quite concerned as to why it's not been looked at more favourably, but that's for them to iron out themselves. So I'm more than happy to second this proposal.
Right. Any further comments? No? Then I'll make my flippant comment now. I find it that to get other departments' comments on the day we're sitting to hear this is totally wrong. And that is the reason why, of course, condition 3 is put on there to draw to the applicant's attention of what he will have to go through, but it's obvious from what he said he's well aware that he's got to go through all that, and he's well within his rights to put in this application. Any other comments? In which case, no.
I will make a comment, and
yeah.
I'm prepared and happy to support the approval. And I too was disappointed that we didn't get this until now. It just seems rather strange that it took so long to come to us.
Right, I'm going to put it...
Alison wants to say something.
Right, I shall ask the officer.
I just wanted to say that we didn't receive it today, that there's been comments in the background. There's obviously the issues of keeping property services and everything separate to planning, so that it wasn't a formal comment on the application. So that's why it's been brought to your attention today. So sorry, it was late. It should have been in the report. It was there at that time, but not quite finalised.
Yes.
So, in that case, it is as I thought when I saw this, that we are the planning committee, which are totally separate to property services. So whatever we see and read, we go by what we've got in front of us and have to...
I just feel it's sad that it hasn't come to us beforehand. Councillor Fowler?
Just to say that I'm happy to support it. And I was a bit confused, just a little bit, when I read the update sheet, and hopefully that will perhaps in time change, and then I might actually get a cup of tea next time I'm down there. Thank you, Chairman. Oh, and a cake. Thank you, Chairman.
Right, I'm going to take it to a vote then without any further comments. Those in favour, please, of supporting it. That application is granted. Right.
It's just nice if you're on the beach to nip up and get a cup of tea and cake, or whatever you want, a sandwich, or whatever you want.
Thank you very much, councillors. That brings us to the end.
Yeah, I thought people would be funny about that. People didn't really think about it. I mean, I really have strong feelings about that.
Councillors and officers, I am just reminded we don't meet again till the new year, so can I wish you the compliments of the season.
I presume it's
wish you all a happy new year, and I thank you very much for having whatever.
Brick at the bottom, and then the wood comes out of the two layers of brick.
I've got. No, that's after January. No, that's in January. That is, I'm pretty sure.
And apparently
I've got these members briefing.
Yeah, I think.
I'm sure you can mention
some kind of workshop. Well chaired, John. That's rather nice sitting here like a passenger and not having to think about worrying about whether I